I'm your date.
The restaurant had already decided who belonged there and who did not. The white tablecloths, the low golden lights, the quiet confidence of wealth hanging in the air, all of it sent the same unspoken message. And the black single father sitting alone in that booth felt it before anyone ever said a word. His hands rested stiffly on the table, his shoulders tight, his eyes scanning the room the way someone does when they know they are being judged. He had arrived hopeful, nervous, and brave enough to believe that maybe, just maybe, this night could be different. But as minutes passed and glances lingered too long, that hope began to collapse. By the time he convinced himself the blind date was a mistake, that he never should have come, the door opened, and everything changed. Backhand index pointing right before the story continues. Make sure you like, share, comment, and subscribe to Black Legacy for powerful stories that expose injustice, reveal truth, and honor resilience. Malcolm Carter had learned long ago how to make himself small without shrinking who he was. It was a skill developed through years of survival rather than choice. As a black man raising a child alone, he understood how easily the world could misread him, how quickly assumptions could form, how effortlessly dignity could be questioned. That understanding followed him everywhere. Into school offices, grocery stores, parent-teacher meetings, and now into this upscale restaurant perched high above the city skyline. He had not chosen the place. The blind dating service had. The email promised a refined atmosphere, a curated match, and a chance at genuine connection. Malcolm almost declined. Fine dining spaces had never welcomed him warmly, no matter how carefully he dressed or how politely he carried himself. But after years of focusing solely on his son, something inside him whispered that it was time to try again. His suit was modest but clean. His posture was composed but cautious. As he sat alone in the red leather booth, the weight of being the only black patron in sight pressed down on him. Servers walked past without making eye contact. Conversations at nearby tables slowed when he shifted in his seat. It wasn't overt. It never was. It was the quiet kind of exclusion, the kind that denied itself while thriving comfortably. Malcolm's life had not always been this restrained. Once, he had dreamed loudly. He had believed love was something that arrived naturally, not something you had to fight for space to experience. That was before loss reshaped his world. His son, Elijah, was 7 years old and already wiser than he should have been. Malcolm often wondered how much of that wisdom came from watching his father navigate disappointment with grace. Elijah's mother had died suddenly years earlier, leaving Malcolm to build a new life out of grief and responsibility. Dating had disappeared from his priorities overnight. Survival replaced romance. Stability replaced desire. And yet, loneliness had a way of resurfacing when least expected. It crept in during late nights after homework was finished, during quiet drives when the city lights blurred together, during moments when Malcolm realized that strength did not erase the human need for companionship. The blind date was supposed to be simple. One meal, one conversation, one opportunity. But as the minutes stretched, the silence around him grew louder. He checked his phone once. Then again. No message, no apology, just the hum of a room that seemed eager for him to disappear. He noticed the hostess whisper to another staff member while glancing in his direction. He noticed a man at a nearby table subtly reposition his chair, as if Malcolm's presence required distance. Each moment chipped away at his resolve. Eventually, resignation settled in. He exhaled slowly, preparing himself for the familiar disappointment. Another reminder that hope was expensive and often wasted on people who never intended to show up. Malcolm reached for his jacket, already rehearsing the story he would later tell himself. That it was no big deal, that he hadn't expected much anyway. That rejection was easier when you anticipated it. Then the door opened. The woman who entered did not rush. She moved with certainty, scanning the room as though she belonged to it completely. Her confidence disrupted the carefully balanced hierarchy of the space. She was white, blonde, and unmistakably out of place in the sense that she refused to blend into expectation. Her presence commanded attention without asking for permission. Malcolm noticed her only because others did. Heads turned. Conversations paused. But unlike the glances he had endured all evening, these were admiring, accepting, familiar. He looked away instinctively. The moment felt unrelated to him. Another reminder of how easily some people were welcome while others remained invisible. But then something strange happened. The woman's gaze stopped, not on the chandeliers, not on the skyline, but on him. Malcolm felt it before he acknowledged it, that uncomfortable sensation of being watched again. He stiffened, preparing for the silent judgment he had learned to anticipate. But the look on her face was not suspicion. It was recognition. She approached his booth without hesitation. The room seemed to lean in as she stood beside him, smiling warmly, as if nothing about this pairing defied expectation. The server slowed. Nearby patrons stared openly now, their confusion undisguised. Malcolm looked up uncertain, his mind scrambling to interpret the moment. He had already accepted rejection. He had already begun retreating emotionally. What stood before him challenged that narrative. She gestured toward the seat across from him, her confidence unwavering, her body language relaxed and assured. There was no embarrassment in her posture, no apology, only certainty. The shift in the room was immediate and electric. What had been silent dismissal transformed into visible discomfort. The same people who had ignored Malcolm moments earlier now watched him closely, reassessing him through the lens of her presence. Their curiosity was not subtle. It was invasive. Malcolm felt the weight of it all pressing down on him. The question forming in every mind was clear. What was she doing here with him? As she settled into the booth, something else became clear. This was not pity. This was not performance. This was intention. Malcolm's thoughts raced. He wondered if this was some elaborate mistake, a social experiment, a cruel misunderstanding. Years of microaggressions had trained him not to trust moments that felt too good to be true, but her attention remained focused entirely on him. Around them, the atmosphere shifted from exclusion to tension. The staff, now suddenly attentive, returned to the table with forced smiles. The same hostess who had whispered earlier now hovered anxiously nearby, her professionalism cracking under confusion. As the evening unfolded, the imbalance of power in the room became impossible to ignore. Malcolm remained the same man he had been minutes earlier, thoughtful, polite, composed. Yet now he was treated differently. Now he was addressed with respect. Now his presence was validated, and the injustice of it burned quietly beneath the surface. The woman's comfort with him exposed something ugly. It revealed how conditional his acceptance had always been, how proximity to whiteness altered perception, how quickly dignity could be granted when endorsed by someone society deemed worthy. Malcolm felt conflicting emotions rise within him, gratitude mixed with anger, relief tangled with resentment. He had not changed, but the room had. As they shared the meal, Malcolm learned that this woman understood power differently. She listened fully. She did not dominate the space. She did not treat him like a curiosity. And yet, her very existence within that booth continued to disrupt the room. He noticed how servers addressed her first, then corrected themselves. He noticed how eyes lingered, how whispers followed. He noticed the discomfort of those who had already judged him unworthy. For the first time that night, Malcolm did not feel alone, but he also felt exposed. Because the truth was unavoidable now. This was not about romance anymore. This was about visibility. The tension reached its peak when authority intervened. A manager approached the table, his expression polished but tight. His presence carried the weight of control, of gatekeeping. He addressed the woman first, his tone deferential, his posture submissive. Then he glanced at Malcolm, his eyes flickering with something that betrayed discomfort. What followed was a moment Malcolm would never forget. The manager questioned the situation, not directly, not explicitly, but through implication, through suggestion, through that practiced language of exclusion that pretends to be concern. The message was clear. This space was not designed for someone like Malcolm, and the only reason he remained was because someone like her had chosen him. The woman did not waver. Her response was calm, unyielding. She did not raise her voice. She did not create a scene. Instead, she revealed the truth with surgical precision. She was not just a guest. She was an investor, a partner, someone whose influence extended far beyond the walls of that restaurant. The revelation rippled outward like a shockwave. The power dynamic collapsed instantly. The manager's authority dissolved into panic. His assumptions were exposed, his biases laid bare. The same systems that had empowered him moments earlier now worked against him. And Malcolm watched it all unfold, his heart pounding, his chest tight with emotion. He had endured discrimination his entire life. He had learned to survive it quietly. But witnessing it unravel in real time, witnessing accountability, felt unreal. The woman's stance was not about defending Malcolm as an individual. It was about confronting a pattern. She named the behavior without dramatizing it. She exposed the hypocrisy without aggression. She held a mirror to the institution and refused to look away. Around them, the room sat frozen. No one spoke, because there was nothing left to deny. The injustice was no longer invisible. Malcolm felt something shift inside him, a release, a recognition, not a validation from the room, but of his own worth. He realized that he had spent years internalizing the idea that belonging was something he had to earn. This moment shattered that illusion. Belonging was never the issue. Acceptance had been conditional. And now, those conditions were exposed. The evening ended not with applause or spectacle, but with quiet reckoning. The restaurant changed policies in the weeks that followed. Staff underwent training. Leadership shifted. But the most profound change occurred within Malcolm. He walked out of that space different than he had entered it, not because someone powerful had chosen him, but because he had seen the truth clearly. He was never invisible. He was ignored. He was never unworthy. He was underestimated, and his presence had always mattered. The date itself became something meaningful, not because of romance alone, but because it reminded Malcolm that vulnerability was not weakness, that hope was not foolish, that dignity did not require permission. For Elijah, Malcolm told the story carefully, not as a fairy tale, not as a victory of chance, but as a lesson. He explained that injustice thrives in silence. That change requires discomfort. That self-worth must never depend on how others treat you. The world would still be unfair. Racism would not disappear overnight. But moments like this mattered, because they forced truth into the open, because they challenged narratives, because they reminded people watching, from booths, from tables, from screens, that bias is not harmless. It is active. It shapes lives. And it must be confronted. Malcolm continued dating, continued parenting, continued showing up as himself. Not smaller, not quieter, but grounded. And the story lived on, not as gossip, not as scandal, but as a reminder that sometimes the night you think is over is the night that changes everything. If this story moved you, challenged you, or opened your eyes, even a little, support the mission. Like the video, share it with others, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel Black Legacy, because stories like these deserve to be heard.